Thank you. How you guys doing? Hanging in? Good. It's a real pleasure to be here. Okay, so despite continual advancements in medicine, one of the most fascinating aspects of healing remains something we've been aware of for centuries: the placebo effect. So today I want to talk about what the placebo effect is, what we know currently about it, but also discuss what we can do to more effectively leverage it to our advantage. So the placebo effect demonstrates the power, the sometimes surprising power of our minds, our thoughts, our beliefs, our expectations to recruit healing properties in the body. Simply taking a sugar pill under the impression that it's a real medication can not only improve your depression or your anxiety, but also reduce your blood pressure, curb your asthma, boost your immune system. Placebo surgeries. Yes, you heard me right. Surgeries in which doctors put people under anesthesia, cut them open, and suture them back up again without doing anything, can get people back on their feet and moving again. And placebo effects don't always take the form of sugar pills or faux procedures, and their effects aren't always so rosy. Fake poison ivy can cause real rashes. The mere fear of side effects can make those effects more likely. And as the major threats to our health have changed from infectious to chronic diseases, and we increasingly look to changes in our behavior, exercise, diet, and stress for solutions, what we're finding is that the benefits of those behaviors too depend in part on our beliefs. For example, in a study we ran while I was at Yale University, we gave people the exact same milkshake, but with two very different labels. One that was sensible, low-fit, low-calorie, and one that was indulgent, high-fat, high-calorie. What we found was fascinating. When people thought they were consuming the indulgent shake, their bodies responded as if they had had more calories. This was marked by the gut peptide ghrelin, which is related to hunger and metabolism. So over the years, medical experts, neuroscientists, placebo researchers have shown that placebos work not just by making us say we feel better, but by activating a whole host of neurobiological effects. I could spend all day talking to you about placebo effects, and those who were at lunch with me just now know that I will. But while these studies are fascinating, the more useful question, these are provocative studies, but the more useful question is not, is there a placebo effect, but what can we do as patients, as providers, as wellness experts to harness the placebo effect consciously and deliberately? The disturbing truth is, despite being aware of the placebo effect for centuries, we know relatively little about what it really is, and we know even less about what to do to produce it on demand. But there's a good reason for our lack of understanding. When we develop new drugs or new treatments, new therapies, we spend billions of dollars trying to outperform the placebo effect. In this model, the randomized control trial model, there are only two possible outcomes for the placebo effect. If the drug or new therapy outperforms the placebo, which it turns out is very difficult to do, only about 10% of new drugs or therapies pass this test. But if it does, if it outperforms the placebo, what happens to the placebo? It's immediately deemed irrelevant. We forget all about any benefit that could have occurred from merely, believing that one is getting this treatment. If, on the other hand, the drug does not outperform the placebo, or the new treatment does not outperform the placebo effect, then what happens to the placebo? Any thoughts? Shout it out. It's also irrelevant. It's irrelevant in a different way. It's actually not irrelevant. Now the placebo effect is the villain, right? Our hopes and dreams are dashed. And millions, actually it's on the order of billions of dollars, go down the drain to a tune of a familiar refrain. It was nothing more than just a placebo effect. Now, don't get me wrong. This is an important model. This is a good, rigorous standard when testing the efficacy of a new drug or therapy. But what this model obscures, what we so often forget, is that in the practice of medicine, the reality of medicine, the reality of wellness, the placebo effect doesn't disappear. It remains actively involved and at play. When we realize this, the whole meaning of placebo effect changes. It's no longer a nuisance variable, but the scaffolding, the foundation, the support system on which the total effect of any treatment is placed. And when we realize this, we realize we need new models that don't just compare against the placebo effect, but models that seek to unpack and understand its underlying components. So let's take a trip to the doctor's office. And I'll tell you about a study where we begin to do just that. So in this study, we had a healthcare provider administer a prick of histamine to the forearm of 164 patients. So histamine produces an allergic reaction on most everybody, which you can measure as it changes in size over time. So about 6 minutes after this histamine was applied and the rash is full-blown, the provider rubs on an inert cream, a placebo cream. For half of the participants, she has some good news. She says, this is an antihistamine cream. It's going to make your rash and irritation better. The other half, she has some not so good news. We can do this in our research. This probably wouldn't happen in real life, hopefully. But she says, this is a histamine agonist. It's going to make your rash and irritation worse. When we came back and measured the size of the reaction 10 minutes later, here's what we found. When the participants thought that the rash or the cream was going to make their rash worse, the rash was worse. And when they thought it was going to make their rash better, the rash was better. Now, this alone is interesting because it suggests that the effect of a treatment depends on the mindsets that we have about that treatment. In other words, mindsets like, this will work, or this is risky, are not irrelevant. They matter in shaping treatment outcomes. But where do those mindsets come from? How are they informed? Now here, obviously, the provider's words were a primary factor. But there could be other factors, right? Like how she acts, or maybe social cues, maybe her white coat. In psychology, we call this the social context. And countless studies have shown that the social context matters tremendously. But can the social context get under the skin? To test that, we changed the social context. So in one scenario, for half the participants, we amped up the warmth of the doctor. She looks the patients in their eyes. She connects with them on a personal level. Instead of just saying, date of birth, location of birth, she says, oh, Ohio. What was it like growing up in Ohio? We also amp up the cues that reflect her competence. Her badge reads fellow at the Stanford Allergy Center. The room is pristine, and she completes the procedure with precision. So why warmth and competence, you might ask? Well, social psychologists have shown that any time we judge somebody new, for better or for worse, we're immediately judging them. And we're immediately judging them on these two characteristics. It makes sense. First, we want to know, does this person have good intentions towards me or bad? Are they warm? But then we want to know, does this person have the ability to enact those intentions? Are they competent? So in order to test the effects of these characteristics in the clinical context, we strip those qualities away. So in this scenario, our doctor is staring at the computer screen. Date of birth, location of birth. Next question. She makes very little or no personal connection at all. We also raised some questions about her competence. She does the histamine right, but her badge reads student doctor. The room is a little messy. And when she puts the blood pressure cuff on, she fumbles. So what did we find? When the provider was warm and competent, what she said about the cream mattered even more. And in particular, the effect of her positive expectations were even more potent. But the cold, blundering doctor, what she said about the cream made no difference at all. This is going. No difference at all, right? She could have said the cream was going to cause hives or rashes. It didn't matter. Right? No difference at all. So what does this tell us? Well, remember those mindsets I said matter? Mindsets like this will work or this is risky? Well, it turns out those mindsets hinge on the social context in which they're shaped. The social cues that add depth, they add meaning behind those mindsets, making them not just this treatment will work, but this treatment will work for me. This treatment will work because I'm in good hands. So this brings us back to the original question. What is the placebo effect really? Well, first, there's the ability of our body to heal itself with time. If you do nothing, the body has a natural and remarkable tendency to heal itself with time. We discussed this morning. But also there's the ability of our mindsets, the mental lenses through which we're perceiving the treatment that work. Why? Because it activates, it triggers our body's natural healing abilities. And third, there's the influence of the social context, the medical ritual, the wellness ritual, the bedside manner, the branding of the drugs, the things that shape our mindset that in turn activates the body's natural healing abilities. When we start to really understand these underlying components in a more sophisticated way, we can become freed from our outdated notions of placebo effects as some mysterious response to a sugar pill, and begin reclaiming them for what they actually are. The words we choose to use, the connections we choose to create. And we can begin to ask more sophisticated questions. Questions like, what is the best mindset to have when you're diagnosed with cancer or diabetes? And how can we create social context imbued with a sense of warmth and competence for people of all backgrounds and ages and races and perspectives? So these are some of the questions that we're interested in our lab at Stanford University, because we believe that medicine and wellness has a real opportunity here. We're talking about simple, inexpensive solutions, changes in our words and our actions that can make a meaningful difference in objective health outcomes. At the end of the day, 3 things are indisputable. First, these components, these forces underlying placebo effects are not irrelevant. They are alive and at play in every single medical or wellness encounter. Second, these forces, they are not adversaries. They're allies, critical building blocks in a hierarchy of healing that can occur. And third, these forces are not mysterious. They can be measured, they can be categorized, and they can be quantified. You know, we spent 13 years and $3 billion mapping the human genome. The results, the early results, have promised that the future of medicine will be more personalized and more precise than ever before. It's been worth every hour and every dollar. But we've also left some really important stones unturned. The healing potential of these forces, the mindset, the social context, the body's natural ability to heal, can be an extraordinary resource for health and living a well life, just as soon as our own minds are open to it. Thank you.